Hello and welcome to Econolicy Africa's policy conversation. My name is Luzinda Wamvundola and I will be your host today. We will be diving into the exciting topic of artificial intelligence and digital preparedness in Africa. I am joined by esteemed panelists from Research ICT Africa. I have with me Dr. Sandra Makumbirofa and Dr. Andrew Rens. They will in a moment introduce themselves and tell us more about their roles at the institution. I will start with Dr. Sandra. Please tell us more about yourself and your role at Research ICT Africa.
Thank you, Lozzie. Thank you for the introduction. So I am a senior economist at Research ICT Africa, and it's a digital policy think tank that is based in Cape Town. And my main role is I lead projects on AI and economic policy in Africa and on mobile data pricing. We track mobile data pricing every quarter, and we publish the results on our website. And then I also lead a project on digital trade, tracking cross-border data flows in Africa, how different African countries have their data protection strategies, how they complement one another or are in contrast with one another, and other several digital policy projects that I'm involved in. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Sandra, and it's a pleasure to have you today. I will now turn to Dr. Andrew. Please tell us more about yourself and your role.
Thank you, Rosie. And luckily, my colleague has already explained what Research ICT Africa does. One thing to add is that we're Pan-African. We have researchers across the continent, actually sub-Saharan, I think, at the moment, but certainly Pan-African ambitions, like yourselves. And we focus on technology policy. And there's sort of been a long history of that, dating back to telecommunications policy originally, and then evolving to our current moment of data and AI, and who knows what's next. So I am a human rights lawyer who seems to have strayed into technology and legal aspects, the legal and policy aspects of technology, I don't know, a couple of decades ago. Along the way have, I guess, become a more eclectic than legal scholar, looking at technology, policy, and law, and looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for being with us today. Having heard this introduction, I think we have the right voices for the topic that we have today, which is on AI and digital preparedness in Africa. So we'll now dive into the discussion on the subject. But before going to that, I just wanted to issue a disclaimer that the views expressed in this panel are the views of the panelists and not necessarily the views of the organizations that we work for. So just to have that clear. And now going into the questions, the first thing I would like us to discuss is, what is AI and what's the buzz around it? How widely different is AI from other digital technologies? So I will start with you, Dr. Sandra.
Okay, thank you. So just to define AI technologies as I understand them, they are computer systems that use vast amounts of data to perform tasks such as reasoning, problem solving, and decision making. And they include a wide range of technologies, such as machine learning, natural language processing, robotics, deep learning, and others, from basic task automation to advanced form of generative AI and future concepts that are yet to come, like AGI. I think the buzz around AI comes from its transformative potential across various sectors of an economy. And this is why we refer AI as a general purpose technology, because of its pervasiveness in reshaping businesses, government processes, and how society operates. Just like previous general purpose technologies like electricity and the internet. I also want to distinguish between this general type of AI, the umbrella AI and generative AI people sometimes confuse them. So generative AI is a type of AI that uses large data sets to learn and create new content, including text, images, audio, and video. And this is unlike the traditional AI, where you have the large data sets to analyze and just automate tasks. So generative AI creates new content. And then we've got the futuristic general purpose AI, which is AGI. This is still a theoretical concept in which AI will have human-like cognitive abilities, which will allow it to perform a wide range of tasks completely like humans do. Yeah, and then in our conceptualization of the production of AI technologies, we see it as having three main inputs. There is capital, labor, and the AI technology itself. So AI technologies, as we know, they utilize a vast amount of data to predict the optimal outcomes. And then it requires a huge amount of capital investment for developing these technologies. This includes investment in funding for research and development, acquiring AI tools, creating and maintaining infrastructure like data centers, and high-performing computer systems. And then the labor, where it comes from, is, labor is quite vital in the multiple stages of the production process of AI technologies. And at the same time, AI technologies themselves can be labor replacing when there's automation, or they can assist workers in completing their tasks more effectively, which is labor augmenting. Yes, I'll stop there.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction into what AI is. And I will now hand over to Dr. Andrew to shed more light on the topic as well.
Thank you. And so one way of thinking what AI is thinking of it as replacing work, or lots of technologies try and replace human work, but in this case, cognitive work. And so one of the contentious issues is, and many people would disagree, that AI can actually reason or actually analyze, etc. But if one thinks of the Turing test, Alan Turing's test is it, does it seem like it does? Does it look like it does? So on this kind of pragmatic test, you could say, well, it doesn't really matter if AI can't actually reason. It does give me a product that looks like it. That's going to continue to be a source of, I think, a lot of debate and attention. Is a purely mimetic thing? Is my parrot, the stochastic parrot in this case, or a normal parrot, repeating some words that doesn't understand the meaning of it? Is that enough, or is that not enough? We're going to, I think, continue to have debates around that. And then, as my colleague said, AI is an assemblage of a whole lot of things. And in Africa, we tend to think of AI as coming from outside, and yet we're completely entangled in this. So important minerals for both batteries and the smart screens needed for AI are mined in Africa, sometimes in ways that are extractive, and also a lot of labor in labeling data sets, etc. And undervalued labor, badly paid, badly supported labor, has been involved in creating AI. So while on the one hand, we think of this as, in some ways, a product of the global north, we're entangled in it, and we're entangled in ways which right now are quite exploitive. So one of the questions is, can that change? How can that relationship with AI that already exists, so let's not pretend it's actually not in the continent, it's already caught up in the continent, can that relationship be changed?
All right, thank you so much for shedding even more light on the subject. And from both your responses, I see that there are a lot of policy issues that could possibly arise from AI. It goes into a lot of sectors, And regulation is definitely something that is needed in relation to AI, which brings me to my next question. Could you please give us an overview of what the AI policy space is currently like in Africa? And we'll start with you, Dr. Sandra.
Okay, thank you. So we've seen a lot of developments in the African continent in terms of AI regulation from as early as 2018 up until right now. I will start with the continental level. We've got the Smart Africa Alliance, which launched the AI Blueprint in 2021. This is a policy document that they developed, which promotes the opportunities that African countries can use AI technologies and ways to try to mitigate the challenges. And then earlier this year, we had the African Union's Development Agency, NEPAD, which launched the AI Roadmap and White Paper. This white paper outlined the strategies to promote diffusion of AI in Africa, and it also addressed some of the risks and challenges that are there. It recognized that the continent faces distinct realities and challenges that are quite different from the developed world, and we should tackle them and utilize AI technologies effectively. They prioritize 5 key pillars, but at the same time, from our analysis, we saw that they missed the opportunity to incorporate the progressive remedies of the African Union's data policy framework, which Dr. Andrew will speak about soon. And since data is at the core of AI technologies, one of the important intersecting policies that we have on the continent is this African Union data policy framework, which represents a significant step towards creating an enabling environment for data governance in Africa through harmonizing digital data governance, which is quite important right now with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We also have the AFCFTA's Protocol on Digital Trade, which recently came out this year as well. This protocol aims to eliminate barriers to digital trade on the continent and establish harmonized rules and standards for digital commerce. Dr. Andrew and I and Professor Allison have a paper coming out soon that will get into more detail about this protocol. But it is also a significant step towards harmonizing data flows on the continent. What we've noticed from our analysis is that all of the different policies that are in Africa say they share the same vision of leveraging digital transformation and technology such as AI for inclusive and sustainable development. But what we found is that they often operate in silos with tension between them. So a significant step that is needed right now is to make sure that these different policies and strategies align in terms of the progressive data governance frameworks that we need for Africa to progress. At the national level, there are currently 9 African countries that already have national policies or national AI strategies in process. And then we've got 10 countries that are in the process of developing these strategies or policies, and 32 African countries that don't have this policy. The first African country to have this policy, the national AI strategy, was Mauritius in 2018. And the most recent one is South Africa, which has recently completed their first draft. These 9 countries that have completed the AI policy strategies are Algeria, Benin, Egypt, Libya, Mauritius, Rwanda, Senegal, Tunisia, and South Africa. I'll hand over to Andrew to speak in more detail.
All right, thank you.
One of the things about AI is that it's completely dependent on data. And technology change seems to happen, often being delayed in Africa and then get rolled out really fast. So this was the case with telephony. Most of the continent struggled with fixed lines, and then cellular telephony developed relatively rapidly. Same way, internet access, which is primarily through mobiles, lagged and now seems to be increasing rapidly. So as a consequence, African countries are still grappling with data. And in fact, the countries around the world are still grappling with effective governance of data, particularly personal data. And the African Union Development Framework, which was released a couple of years ago by the African Union, seeks to assist African countries to develop appropriate data policies where they have them, to update them, and to harmonize them. And the whole idea is that we'll need a single digital market, as also imagined by the Continental Free Trade area, that we have harmonious, not identical, because different countries have different situations, data policy. AI sits, in a sense, on top of data policy, so AI policy, because if we don't get data policy right, there's not going to be able to, A, there's not going to be local AI, and B, we're not going to be able to govern what AI there is properly. So in particular, there need to be data regulators in African countries with the power to then begin to extend their mandates to AI. Now, the instruments that Sandra spoke about tend to take a slightly different approach to this. They acknowledge the importance of of data to AI, but they tend to imagine a sort of regime where we can imagine every legal aspect, every policy aspect of AI. And that seems unrealistic. An incremental approach, which builds on data governance, seems more likely to be able to deal with the problems as they arise, rather than trying to write a single big complex policy or law that will catch everything, because we already know that these technologies change so fast. So when I first began working on AI, the exciting technology was computer vision. And the concerns we had were around surveillance, recognition. Well, that's now history, right? Maybe we'll be interested in again in a few years, but now we're concerned about generative AI. And the beginning of the concerns about generative AI was how they devalue the work of artists and writers, because now somebody could use generative AI instead of their work. But now we've got deepfake video that can destabilize democracies. So the technology moves really fast. Imagining that we can take a snapshot in time and predict it and resolve all the problems in a single policy or a single act, I think is unrealistic. So what we need is an incremental approach that builds on data governance to try and deal with these issues. But that doesn't mean we need to wait and see. Don't get me wrong, we do not. We need to start moving on all of the problems we're aware of now, knowing that more will come pretty rapidly.
All right, thank you so much. That was very informative. You shed a lot of light into what the current situation is as far as AI policy is related. And I think you also started going into what should be the case. So this brings me to the next question. What, in your perspective, should be the intent of an AI-related policy in light of all these intricacies that you have pointed out? So as usual, we'll start with you, Dr. Sandra.
Okay, so I think for an intentional market-related policy for Africa, it should be one that creates an enabling environment, that is risk mitigating and opportunity creating for AI diffusion to be beneficial for all Africans. I think if we have an African context specific approach to this, we can ensure that AI is developed in such a way that and deployed in Africa in such a way that it benefits Africans and solves African problems. This includes building AI capacity in Africa through investments in public digital infrastructures, investments in the relevant education, awareness of opportunities for everyone, and digital literacy, which is some of the foundational digital problems that we have in the African continent, and creating inclusive policies that are tailored to the unique socioeconomic and linguistic contexts of all the 54 African countries that we have. It's a big task, but I think that's what it would take to take this through. And we also need to make our African data sets available so that AI technologies are trained on our local context for them to work for Africans and our interests. This means making available the government data or the private data that is collected by private sector, and having standards around data categorization at the AU level, so that all African countries have a uniformed kind of data categories, so that our data can be utilized for training AI technologies. I think also, like Dr. Andrew Rens has just said, we should implement the progressive data governance prescriptions from the AU data policy framework, so that the data that is gathered from African countries can be processed in Africa, and also allowing preferential access to our African developers and research, to give them that competitive advantage, and allowing them technology transfer and AI capabilities to be built here in Africa and not just abroad.
All right, thank you for that. And now proceed to Dr. Andrew. You shed more light.
Really excited about the fact that what AI gives for Africa is an opportunity to make our own technologies. So we don't really need labor replacement technologies in the continent. We need economic opportunities. So whereas some other continents might face aging populations and have a real labor crunch, we don't. So we need different kinds of technologies. We also need technologies that are trained on, since the dominant technologies right now are large language models, on our languages, and not just on these global languages. And we need technologies that can run on our systems. So that might mean less energy intensive, less data intensive, but that are then homegrown and locally used technologies. And in particular, we also need to start looking at the trade-offs. So, for example, we need less energy intensive AIs because we're going to face growing energy demand across the continent, plus a global shift away from fossil fuels. Plus, we've seen in the global north that massively increasing energy demand of the current generation of AI technologies. So we should be looking at the next generation of AI technologies, which do promise to be much less energy intensive, which do promise to not require as dramatically large data sets, and which promise to be more customizable, particularly the open source versions. And then those can be under the control of African developers, as opposed to people in the global north, so that we can then kind of customize them to deal with our problems, our specific problems. And so one of the things that makes me optimistic is I hear people excited about adopting the technologies from the global north, but also people really excited about making quite dramatic changes to those technologies. So they work for the African context. I think there's much more realization and appreciation of the fact that these technologies need to be contextualized than perhaps some previous technologies where people use the language of catch up. And I don't think we want to catch up. I think we want to mod. And I think that a lot of the discourse I hear suggests that even governments, certainly entrepreneurs, technologists get that we want to roll our own, and that's really, really important for these technologies to benefit African economies.
Thank you so much for that. Those were very insightful comments or remarks on how best the policies can be tailored to the unique needs of Africa, which is a very important direction that we need to take as a continent. So thank you so much to you both for those insights. And now I would like to ask you, both of you, what the key takeaways from this discussion would be. If there is one thing, or maybe two things that we should remember from this discussion, what would they be? So starting with you, Dr. Sandra, and then Dr. Andrew.
Thank you for the opportunity once again. I think one of the main takeaways from this conversation is that AI technologies are already here on the African continent. We're already using them. So it's up to policymakers to be very intentional when they're coming up with their AI strategies and AI policies, and create an enabling environment, create the type of policies that are just. And when I say just AI policies, I'm talking about policies that are rights preserving, policies that create opportunities for Africans, policies that are risk mitigating, because some of these technologies do pose a lot of future harms, some that we can predict right now, some that are already occurring, and some that we are yet to learn of. Yes, so that's the key takeaway.
Thank you. And Dr. Andrew?
So my key takeaway is get data right first. So every AI policy and every AI law, etc., is important, and we should start working on them now, but they should both envisage that appropriate data regimes are in place first, and also talk to those regimes. Don't come up with policies that are in tension with the data policies that are being put in place in many African countries and continentally. So build on the data and get data right first. And so also thank you once again for this opportunity to discuss this with you and with your audience.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure having you, Dr. Andrew and Dr. Sandra. We're really grateful to have these insights that I believe are key in terms of policy development for this phenomenon that we cannot ignore, the advent of AI. So thank you very much for sharing your insights. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.